The time is just gone 9:15 a.m. as we continue into the second half of this morning's edition of News and Views right here on Salam Media. If you have just tuned in, we welcome you to the show. And we're moving on. And I think many of us woke up this morning with the news that a new reality from the United States of America confirmed by Donald Trump about the new tariff rate to South Africa. And this together with South Africa, 70 other countries as well. The key question is what does this all mean if we put these tariffs into context? And also at the same time, we know that South Africa has already been concerned about this, looking at some urgent interventions to protect jobs in South Africa, but also in terms of exports to the United States of America. That's also another critical issue that we need to be talking about as well. But we've seen also the Reserve Bank announcing a cut in the interest rate as well. And this is a question that is being raised. Will this be the last line of defense against these US tariff hikes? We're joined now by economist Reezwana Sumad. Reezwana, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome. And we do appreciate your time this morning.
Walaikum salam. Jazakallah for having me.
Yes, we knew this whole issue surrounding tariffs has been on the cards for a very, very long time. And Donald Trump, knowing who he is, what he is, a loose cannon, and this since he's taken office as well, the threat of the tariffs not only against South Africa but across the entire world. But just looking at South Africa at this point in time, where we are, we know that we are not doing well in the economic space. The economy is not doing well, but looking at these tariffs that have been imposed on South Africa, what does this actually mean, Rizwana?
Yeah. So the higher tariffs that South Africa will face when supplying the US with products mean that South Africa is now going to compete on a much bigger scale from a tariff perspective relative to the rest of the world. If you think of some of our agricultural produce vehicles that we export to the US, those were exported to the US previously under AGOA, the AGOA trade agreement, at 0% tariff. So effectively, we're supplying the US market with agricultural produce, with vehicles, at a 0% tariff. Now, with a 25 or 30% tariff being imposed on all South African products or most of South African products, it means that for the US consumer, it's going to be 30% more expensive to buy South African made products. And it will definitely mean that South Africa, the competition from a price perspective to still compete in the US market becomes quite difficult. For South Africa's producers of vehicles, agricultural produce, manufactured items, mineral resources, it could mean that if US consumers or US businesses demand less of our products that we export to the US, it means, of course, perhaps local businesses need to find another buyer, another market. If we can't find another buyer for that produce, then businesses will have to downsize, downscale. This could result in job losses. So it does have a longer term negative impact on the country, and that's if the US demands less of our goods because it's more expensive to consume South African products because of the tariffs.
Yes, Rizwana. And I know, South Africa and also our trade minister as well tried right up to the 11th hour, right up to the last minute, because as the countdown to August the 1st continued and the day we knew that, this was a deadline that was actually set to try and obviously convince the Trump administration and the United States otherwise. But sadly, this obviously hasn't materialized. It hasn't worked. And as you
Yeah.
mentioned, that certain industries could be affected, and they could be affected quite badly to the extent that some economists are saying over 100,000 jobs that could be lost.
Yeah, especially in our labor intensive industries, like I've mentioned, agriculture as well as manufacturing, auto manufacturing, that were previously exporting to the US under a 0% tariff. So there are significant negative implications, but I think we're getting a bit ahead of ourselves right now because we do know that. Um, the South African delegation is still negotiating with the US. President Trump signed a memo yesterday where he had indicated that South Africa is one of the countries that the US is negotiating for a trade agreement, a better trade agreement with. So the dust hasn't settled yet. Yes, the 30% tariff kicks in today. But there are a couple of things that we need to consider. There are many products that are exempt from the higher tariffs. These are really being in the mining industry or focused on the mining industry or mineral products. Many of those are exempt from the higher tariffs, but also discussions are ongoing. So the actual tariff might settle at something that is substantially less than 30%. So I think we must avoid getting ahead of ourselves because discussions are still continuing with the U.S. Trade representatives.
Yes, Rizwana. But also, I think, when one looks at Donald Trump, and many are saying that he is a transactional president, and, this is his thinking, this is his philosophy as well, in terms of the United States of America and what would work best for the United States of America. And that's why he's got this Make America Great policy that he has been pushing for a very, very long time. But looking at a country like South Africa, we still remain a strong player on the African continent, one of the powerhouse economies on the African continent. Do we have any options at this point in time?
I think South Africa does have many options, and for now, our options seem to be focused on minerals or really looking at the minerals that South Africa exports to the US. There are some minerals that South Africa supplies to the US that South Africa is the biggest supplier. To the US of. So, for example, manganese ore and byproduct of the manganese mining process. We supply the US with the bulk of their PGMs, so platinum group metals and related metals. So South Africa is a significant supplier into the US economy of these metals, and this might be a negotiating tool that the South African trade delegation can negotiate with the US. Over and above that, we are a big supplier of agricultural fruits and vegetables into the US market. South Africa is one of the top exporters of citrus fruit. And we do know that in Western countries in general, the consumer is quite fussy in terms of the quality of fresh produce. And South Africa's exports of fresh produce are and far superior A grade quality. So we've got quality agricultural produce. We are the leading suppliers of some minerals that the US consumes, particularly PGMs, platinums, and some ores, and those can be used as a negotiating tool with the US counterparts. We also know that many US businesses would like to set up their businesses in South Africa. I think. It is very negative. The news coverage on this is very negative, but we also need to think about the longer term, perhaps positive implications of if we do get more foreign investment, more US investment coming into the country, what that could mean for economic growth and job creation. Not now, probably you're going to experience the negative impact of this, but perhaps in 5 years' time, there could be some positive outcomes from this.
Yes, and also Rizwana, I think you speak about longer term, and this is what I wanted to ask you. Even the medium to the longer term, do we have the capacity to ride the storm while these negotiations are taking place? We've seen the Reserve Bank, the rate cut 25 basis points yesterday as well. Is that a factor? Is it also a line of defense?
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's a line of defense, but if you look at South Africa's economy now compared to, say, 4 years ago, we're on a much better footing. is from all angles. If you look at the government is focusing on structural reforms, fixing logistics, fixing water infrastructure, bulk water infrastructure, investing in infrastructure. Whereas 5 years ago, we were perhaps we didn't really put in this much importance or emphasis on structural reforms, strengthening and growing the economy. So the economy is on a much better footing, and we do think that the path ahead is only upward from a growth perspective. So I would say that the economy can withstand, a 30% tariff knock or a temporary tariff knock by the US. My bigger concern, however, is if global growth slows, so the global economy slows on a multi year basis. So 1 year slowdown, perhaps everybody can manage, and then the economy sort of bounces back up from that. But if it's a multi year global growth slowdown, South Africa, being a small, open, emerging market economy, will be sort of carried in that boat as well. With regards to the interest rate cuts that we have seen thus far, and potentially in the future as well, I would not say that that's a line of defense. It's purely a function of what inflation has done locally. South Africa's inflation, which is currently around 3%, is well below the 4.5% inflation target. We saw yesterday the Reserve Bank announced that it would like to reduce the inflation target to 3%. And effectively, low and lower inflation in the country benefits everybody. It benefits businesses that need to borrow to fund and expand their businesses. It provides the Reserve Bank with more room to cut interest rates if inflation is low. It would imply borrowers would save on interest costs. It really impacts the whole economy if inflation were to remain low and interest rates can come down further in the coming months. So it is almost another catalyst to support spending and growth in the economy.
Just finally, Rizwana, our association with BRICS, and when we are talking about alternatives, is there a factor? Is there opportunity? And particularly looking at an expanding BRICS and also looking at the global south that could offer opportunities to mitigate any damage that has a potential of harming the economy
Yeah.
as a result of these tariffs.
Yeah, if you look at BRICS alone and already uh, consumes more South African products, so most of our exports or more of our exports go to BRICS than it does to the US. The US is our second largest trading partner, but if you look at China, China is our largest trading partner, and China is really aligned with South Africa in terms of BRICS. So yes, South Africa have options to expand trading within their BRICS counterparts. Brazil, Russia, India, China, especially. So that is sort of an area that BRICS is currently developing. There are working groups that are currently discussing how can we expand trade within BRICS countries or BRICS. Another factor to consider is Africa, the rest of Africa. You mentioned upfront that South Africa is a big player and economic powerhouse within Africa itself. But a lesser known fact is if you look at Africa, Africa, uh, 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 South African exports to Africa is also amongst the top three there. So Africa is another major trading partner for South Africa to consider growing that base in coming months. So there are levers to diversify our trade away from the US. But the bottom line is if the actions of the US government via higher trade tariffs weaken global growth, so world growth, all of these countries, whether you look at the West, whether you look at the East, whether you look at the global South, whether you look at Africa, all of these countries' economic growth will weaken. So we're talking about global growth, and there are going to be limited pockets of places to export to or to diversify our exports to if the whole world economy is weakening on the back of higher trade tariffs. So that, like I said earlier as well, that is the biggest risk right now. If the world economy weakens, but not on a standalone 1 year basis, but on a rolling, 3 year basis, if global growth weakens, and that is the biggest risk that we currently face.
Well, Rizwana, shukran, jazakallah khairan so much for your time, senior research analyst at NetBank CIB. We do appreciate you taking time out with us this morning right here on Salam Media. All the best to you. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Walaikum salam.
Reezwana, Sumad with us this morning, and with that, we're going to go for a break. We come back, we'll be joined by a member of Mothers for Gaza, Aisha Beggars, a mother's cry across borders, pleading for the lives to save the children of Gaza.